Marie Osmond, a name that once embodied American entertainment's innocence and hope in the 1970s. With her ethereal voice and radiant smile, she became a national treasure, the shining jewel of the Osmond clan, and a beloved memory for millions of viewers who grew up watching her on television. But fame casts a cruel shadow. Behind the dazzling lights was a young girl forced to sacrifice her childhood, a woman battered by the demands of perfection, and a mother who, in the most tragic turn of fate, lost her son to the darkness she herself once endured. How did America's sweetheart become a silent bearer of pain too deep for words? And why, at 65, did she make the shocking decision to leave behind no fortune for her children? This video will take you through the heartbreaking journey of Marie Osmond, a woman who smiled for the world while silently crumbling inside. If you have ever known or admired Marie Osmond, please don't forget to hit like. Your small gesture is a tribute to an extraordinary talent who deserves to be honored. Marie Osmond never truly had a childhood. At just 3 years old, while other little girls clutched teddy bears and danced in sunlit playgrounds, she stood beneath scorching studio lights, clutching a microphone, already a sacrifice, already a performer. Her innocence wasn't lost. It was taken, traded for fame before she even knew its meaning. Born in 1959, the only daughter among 9 Osmond siblings, Marie wasn't just part of a family. She was the centerpiece of a brand. From the moment she could walk, her life no longer belonged to her. At an age when most children were learning to read or giggling through hide-and-seek, Marie was memorizing lines, perfecting harmonies, and keeping up with the relentless schedule of a rising television sensation. Her first major appearance came in 1962 on The Andy Williams Show, a moment most toddlers would forget. But for Marie, it marked the beginning of a lifelong contract with the spotlight. Her parents, devout Mormons with a dream of a legacy, demanded nothing short of perfection. Every sibling had to master instruments, undergo elite training, and teach one another. Childhood joy was not an option. When Marie once asked to go outside and play, her mother's chilling response was, "No, you can't go. You have work to do." Reflecting on those early years, Marie later said, "I felt more like a product than a child, and the industry took full advantage." At just 11, she was sent on what should have been an exciting trip to Japan for a commercial shoot. Instead, it became a nightmare. The boat she traveled on capsized, leaving her stranded in shark-infested waters. She was eventually rescued, blistered by sunburn and severely dehydrated. But instead of being allowed to rest or heal, she was forced back into the recording studio, her injuries dismissed in favor of deadlines. "I was covered in burns," she once recalled. "And still, I was told to smile and sing." It's tragic, it's cruel, and it's heartbreakingly real. In her raw memoir, Behind the Smile, Marie revealed the deep emotional toll of those years, the confusion, the isolation, and the haunting emptiness masked behind a perfect smile. Even as she became the radiant darling of America's favorite musical family, her voice outside the studio was muted, her true self stifled. She silently learned to disconnect from rest, from joy, from any sense of control. Yet through it all, she didn't break. That unyielding strength, hardened by relentless pressure, would later carry her through devastating heartbreaks, public scrutiny, and the unimaginable grief of losing a child. From her earliest days, Marie Osmond wasn't simply trained to perform, she was conditioned to survive. And behind every standing ovation, there remained a little girl who had never been allowed to simply be a child. Just when Marie Osmond thought the worst was behind her, fame came calling. And with it, a new kind of pain. At just 15 years old, she became the shining face of the Donny and Marie Show, a prime-time variety program that catapulted her into the national spotlight. To millions, she was a radiant teen idol, glowing with innocence and charm. But what the audience never saw was the silent battle Marie fought behind the scenes, a battle with her own reflection. The show placed her beside the most glamorous women of the time, Jacqueline Smith, Farrah Fawcett, Raquel Welch. Marie later confessed that standing next to them, she felt like she was playing dress-up, a child pretending to be a star. That self-doubt grew dangerous when studio executives issued a chilling ultimatum: lose 10 lb or risk cancellation. At the time, Marie weighed only 103 lb. The demand was cruel, but Marie complied. Driven by shame and fear, she starved herself down to 93 lb, surviving on a mixture of lemon juice, cayenne pepper, and maple syrup, a punishing diet popularized in Hollywood but never meant for a teenager. Her routine was agonizing. She would fast for days before tapings just to squeeze into costumes that symbolized acceptance. This act of control, or what she thought was control, spiraled into something far darker. By her early 20s, Marie had developed both anorexia and bulimia. In her 2018 interview, she finally revealed the extent of her suffering. "They called me an embarrassment. At 23 lbs, I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to feel. It was the only way I could take back control." Her smile, so constant on screen, was masking a storm within. This period also forced her to confront deeper wounds. In a 2019 appearance on The Talk, Marie opened up about being physically abused as a child, a haunting experience that had long gone unspoken. "When I was 8 or 9, I actually thought I was different," she shared, hinting at a time when she questioned her worth and identity. The weight obsession wasn't just about beauty. It was rooted in a lifelong message she had absorbed that her value came from performance, from perfection, from being palatable. This toxic equation broke her spirit piece by piece, and yet she endured through silent suffering and societal expectations. Marie kept performing. But every round of applause came at the cost of a deeper emotional wound. Her story during these years wasn't one of youthful stardom. It was one of surviving emotional and physical punishment in a world that asked for more and more until nothing was left to give. Still, somehow she gave. And in giving, she stayed. She stayed for her fans, for her family, and perhaps in some way for the little girl who never got to be a child. The glitter of the spotlight hid a young woman crying out for self-worth. Marie Osmond didn't just grow up in front of America. She bled behind its curtains. But through it all, she never let go of hope. Not entirely. Even as the world judged her, Marie chose to survive, a decision that would come to define the next chapter of her life. She sang of love, but her own heart knew heartbreak far too well. For all the glittering gowns and stage lights that framed Marie Osmond's life, behind the scenes was a woman quietly chasing a dream of lasting love, only to find it slipping through her fingers time and again. In the late 1970s, as America's sweetheart graced television screens across the nation, she was also navigating the delicate emotions of her first romantic encounters. One of her earliest crushes was Michael McDonald of the Doobie Brothers, a tender affection that never fully blossomed but remained close to her heart. Marie admired his soulful voice and introspective nature, finding comfort in the serenity he exuded. Yet their connection never evolved beyond gentle admiration, two artists on parallel paths that briefly intersected. Soon after, she dated Andy Gibb, the golden boy of pop and a man she once called adorable and so kind. Their romance was sweet but fleeting, ending like a melody unresolved. Andy's struggle with addiction and the demands of fame proved too heavy for their young love to bear. Marie remembered their time together with fondness, once saying, "He had the kindest heart. I only wish the world had been kinder to him." Then came David Cassidy, another icon of television and teen fame. From the outside, they looked like a perfect match, both beautiful, beloved, and wildly successful. But under the surface, their worlds were spinning too fast, too separately. The relationship, while filled with excitement, lacked the grounding Marie needed. It was like trying to hold on to a dream while everything else was spinning out of control, she once recalled. In 1982, Marie married Steve Craig, a former basketball player she believed would bring her a sense of normalcy. She was just 22, a young woman hoping to write a quieter chapter away from the glare of stardom. They welcomed a son, and for a time Marie believed she had found her anchor. But only 3 years later, the fairy tale unraveled. The couple divorced in 1985, and Marie was left to pick up the emotional pieces. The public nature of the split added to the burden. She later admitted, "I felt like I had failed, not just as a wife, but as a mother." Just a year later, in 1986, she married Brian Blossel, a man she would spend over 2 decades with and with whom she raised a large blended family of 8 children. From the outside, it seemed she had finally found the stability she yearned for, but behind closed doors, the cracks were forming. The marriage, while filled with moments of love and togetherness, was also marked by emotional distance and unresolved pain. Marie rarely spoke publicly about the struggles, but when she did, her words revealed deep weariness. "I was tired of pretending everything was okay. It wasn't. The demands of raising a large family, maintaining a career, and navigating emotional disconnect quietly took a toll." By 2007, after 21 years of marriage, Marie and Brian divorced, a decision that shook the foundation of the life she had built. It wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was the end of a belief that love, after all the tries, might finally hold. Her heart, once so full of hope, now carried the quiet ache of disappointment. As she entered this new chapter, single once more with a fractured heart and the weight of motherhood, Marie was about to face the greatest heartbreak of her life. But even in these years of failed relationships and quiet despair, she remained unwavering in her love for her children. That love would be tested in ways no mother should ever endure. And what came next would change Marie Osmond forever. In the eyes of the public, Marie Osmond had it all: fame, beauty, and a successful career. But behind the dazzling lights and applause was a woman silently battling one of the most devastating personal struggles any mother could endure. Marie, a mother of 8, faced an emotional storm that nearly broke her spirit, one that began quietly but would shape much of her personal life. By 1999, after giving birth to her 7th child, Matthew, Marie was no longer the effervescent icon the public knew. She was emotionally drained, overwhelmed, and most heartbreakingly deep in the throes of postpartum depression. In a raw and revealing interview with TV Guide that same year, she opened up, "I couldn't function. My body ached. My arms wouldn't move, and my thoughts terrified me." What many dismissed as typical baby blues had spiraled into something much darker. Her depression became so severe that one day she walked out of her home, leaving her children behind with a babysitter. She drove aimlessly for days, unsure if she'd ever return. It was only when she came back that a doctor confirmed what she already feared. She was suffering from clinical depression. This wasn't Marie's first brush with emotional turmoil, but it was one of the deepest. And while she had endured public scrutiny and industry pressures for years, nothing prepared her for the internal battle that followed childbirth. She later admitted in a 2010 interview with Oprah Winfrey that she had even contemplated vanishing from the world. "There were moments when I was driving and thought, would anyone really miss me?" That's how depression speaks to you. It lies. As if this pain weren't enough, the public speculation made it worse. In August 2006, rumors erupted that Marie had attempted to harm herself and was hospitalized. The tabloids fed off the narrative, but her publicist quickly clarified the truth. It was a reaction to medication that caused her to black out, not an intentional act. Yet, the damage was done. The public's misunderstanding of mental illness only magnified her suffering. Marie, however, handled the situation with grace. She didn't lash out at the media. Instead, she used her platform to talk candidly about her mental health, hoping to remove the stigma for other mothers suffering in silence. Still, the weight on her shoulders didn't let up. In 2007, while competing on Dancing with the Stars, Marie collapsed live on national television just moments after finishing a samba performance. Viewers watched in horror as she fainted during the judges' critiques. Paramedics rushed to the stage, but Marie recovered quickly, even managing to crack a joke shortly afterward. "I guess I just sombered myself into the floor," she quipped. But the incident was a glaring reminder of how deeply Marie was pushing herself emotionally, mentally, and physically. Through it all, Marie never lost sight of her love for her children. Her role as a mother, though fraught with pain and uncertainty, remained her most cherished. She once said, "Motherhood is not for the faint of heart. It breaks you down, but it also rebuilds you in ways you never imagined." That sentiment rang especially true as she navigated raising 8 children while battling the shadows of mental illness. Her journey through postpartum depression was not just about survival. It was about transformation. It taught her to prioritize her mental health, to ask for help, and to lean into faith when the weight felt unbearable. For a woman who once represented the squeaky clean image of Hollywood's ideal daughter and sister, Marie's vulnerability became her strength. In sharing her story, Marie Osmond didn't just advocate for awareness. She gave a voice to the voiceless. To the mothers sitting in silence, to the women too ashamed to ask for help, to the daughters who believed they had to be perfect. She showed them that healing begins with honesty. Her words, her pain, and her courage became a lifeline. This chapter of Marie's life is not about celebrity or glamour. It's about a woman brought to her knees by the quiet agony of depression and her decision to rise anyway. In her resilience, we find not only sorrow, but hope. Because through every breakdown, Marie Osmond found a way to rise again. Not just for herself, but for the family she loved more than anything. No mother should ever have to bury her child. For Marie Osmond, that unimaginable nightmare became a devastating reality in 2010 when she lost her beloved son, Michael. In this most heartbreaking chapter of her life, the eternal smile that had brightened American television for decades faded behind a grief so deep, so raw, it nearly shattered her. In this video, you will witness not just a tragedy, but a mother's unthinkable pain, her desperate search for answers, and the quiet strength that carried her through the darkest night of her soul. It was a chilly February evening in 2010 when Marie, preparing for a live performance with her brother Donny, noticed a missed call from her 18-year-old son. She would never get to hear his voice again. Moments later, the call that followed was from the coroner's office. Michael had fallen from the 8th floor of his Los Angeles apartment building. The official cause? Multiple blunt trauma from the fall, no drugs, no alcohol, just a silent, unbearable pain that had consumed him. The loss of Michael was more than a tragedy. It was a scream into the void, a violent rupture in Marie's world. He had battled depression for years. He had promised her he wouldn't do anything drastic. But depression is a silent predator, hiding behind smiles and soft reassurances. Later, she would discover a note, words scrolled from a place of torment, confirming that he had been bullied and felt hopeless. That note, she said in a trembling voice, was the last echo of his soul. Marie later revealed on the talk, "He had made that promise to me that he would never do it, but he was so bullied he didn't tell me. And because I didn't know, I couldn't help." The guilt haunted her. As a mother of 8, she had fought hard to protect her children. But this loss, this was the kind of pain that pierced her to the bone. For days, she couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The world blurred into a haze of sorrow. And yet, just a few days later, Marie walked back on stage. "The only reason I went back to work," she said, "was so I wouldn't sit in a room and cry all day." The strength it took to smile, to perform, to breathe while her soul was screaming is something only the bravest can understand. That same year, she told Oprah, there were times I'd drive my car and think about it, and then I'd say, "Marie, that's ridiculous." But I have to admit, I had those thoughts. In 2018, Marie opened up further. "The truth is, when you're that low, you just want the pain to stop. It wasn't about dying. It was about ending the pain." It's a distinction that echoes with countless others who have faced the same emotional abyss. The aftermath was brutal. Michael's siblings were devastated. The home became a shrine of silence. Marie, a woman who had already battled postpartum depression in the late 90s, now faced a grief that words couldn't contain. But through the agony, something extraordinary happened. Marie chose to speak out. She turned her pain into a purpose. On national platforms, she began to share Michael's story, not for pity but to shine a light on mental health, bullying, and the importance of communication. Her voice, once known for sweet melodies, now carried the weight of advocacy. She partnered with organizations to raise awareness, urging parents to check in, to listen closely, to notice the signs. In doing so, she gave Michael's death meaning beyond loss. Yet, the scars remained. In 2022, she dedicated a song in her Vegas show to Michael, her voice breaking midway. The audience, moved to tears, rose to their feet in silence. It wasn't just a performance. It was a sacred moment of remembrance. In 2023, on the anniversary of his death, she posted, "13 years, and not a day goes by that I don't think of him." Grief doesn't disappear. You just learn to carry it differently. The pain never left. It became part of her. But it also deepened her compassion. Friends and fans noticed a new gravity in Marie's presence, a woman who had suffered, survived, and now held space for others in pain. Through her loss, Marie became a beacon not just of endurance, but of grace. Today she remains one of Hollywood's rare souls who dares to talk about the hard truths. That even stars break, that even mothers crumble. And yet, like a phoenix, she rose, scarred but shining. Her story is not just about heartbreak. It's about the enduring power of love, the strength of a grieving mother, and the legacy of a boy whose memory now saves lives. Michael's life was short, but through Marie, his voice echoes still. Just when Marie Osmond thought her soul had endured the deepest pain a mother could ever face, life delivered wave after wave of new heartbreak. The years following Michael's death were not a time of healing. They were a slow unraveling of more loss, more grief, and the cruel reality that even those who smile the brightest are not spared from sorrow. In this next chapter, you will witness how Marie, once the beacon of joy for millions, silently weathered the relentless storm of death and heartache within her own family. Although the world remembers Marie as the cheerful singer from the 1970s, those closest to her know that behind her sparkling eyes lies a history of staggering loss. In 2004, Marie said goodbye to her beloved mother, Olive Osmond, the woman who had been her spiritual anchor. Olive wasn't just a mother. She was Marie's best friend, a calming presence amid the chaos of fame. When Olive passed away, Marie felt like a part of her soul had vanished. "She was my compass," she later shared, her voice filled with a mixture of gratitude and aching nostalgia. Only 3 years later, in 2007, Marie lost her father, George. Though he had lived to witness the heights of the Osmond family's success, his absence left another hole in her heart. Both her parents were gone, two of her greatest sources of strength. Marie, now a mother herself and a national icon, suddenly felt like a child again, abandoned in a vast emotional wilderness. The heartbreak didn't stop there. In 2018, her family was hit once more, this time with the sudden death of one of her grandchildren. Though details remain private out of respect, Marie hinted at the tragedy during a somber moment in an interview. Her voice trembling. "Loss doesn't get easier. It just becomes more familiar." The look in her eyes said what words could not. Then came 2022, a year that shattered her daughter Jessica's world. Jessica's husband, Chris Mortensen, died as a result of street violence. The senselessness of the incident left Marie reeling. As a mother watching her own child grieve the loss of a life partner, she felt a helpless kind of agony. It was a grief within a grief, an echo of the pain she knew all too well. As if the burden wasn't already too much, Marie's older brother Verl suffered a severe stroke around this time. Verl, one of the original Osmond brothers, had been a pillar of the family's musical dynasty. His sudden decline served as yet another reminder of how fragile life can be. Marie stood by her family, quietly holding everyone together, even as her own heart continued to fracture in silence. But perhaps the most devastating blow came in early 2025. Marie's brother, Wayne Osmond, passed away at the age of 73 after suffering a stroke. Wayne was not just a sibling. He had been a constant in her life, a confidant, a co-performer, and a gentle soul whose laugh had brought her comfort during the darkest nights. His death tore yet another jagged wound into a heart already worn thin. On social media, Marie described it as another giant hole in my heart. The pain in her words resonated with fans who had followed the Osmonds for decades. They too had come to love Wayne, and they grieved with her. These compounded losses were not just personal, they were symbolic. Each death marked the slow fading of an era, a family dynasty, a life once bursting with music, laughter, and boundless energy. And Marie, ever the public figure, was forced to balance public appearances with private mourning. Still, through every loss, she never wavered from her message of strength. "We all carry something," she said during a 2023 interview. "But I've learned that the heart can stretch farther than you think. It breaks. It bleeds. But it also holds space for healing." These aren't just words. They are the truth carved into her soul. As the years passed, Marie didn't retreat from life. Instead, she chose to keep showing up for her fans, her children, and the memory of those she had lost. Her continued presence in the spotlight wasn't vanity. It was survival. It was defiance against a world that had taken so much from her. Through the years, her fans saw the shift. The once bubbly teen idol had become a woman of quiet resilience. Her performances now carried a deeper resonance, a sense of history and heartbreak that could not be taught, only lived. She no longer sang just to entertain. She sang to honor, to remember, and to endure. By 2025, Marie Osmond had become more than just a celebrity. She was a symbol, a mother who had buried a child, a daughter who had lost both parents, a sister, aunt, and grandmother who carried the weight of loss with grace and dignity. And through it all, she never stopped believing in love, family, and the power of faith. Because in Marie's world, pain may be inevitable, but surrender never is. At 65, while many celebrities fade into quiet retirement, Marie Osmond continues to shine in her own unique way, not from the spotlight, but from the quiet strength of a woman who has endured, healed, and chosen joy. Nestled in the peaceful desert landscape of St. George, Utah, Marie's 10,000-square-foot mansion is more than a luxurious retreat. It's a reflection of a life rebuilt with intention and love. She has lived here since 1999, long before some of her greatest losses, and the home has grown with her, transforming from a house into a sanctuary. It boasts a private pool, tennis court, and a professional-grade recording studio, a tribute to her enduring connection to music. Yet what makes it truly special isn't the size or the amenities, but the soul poured into every corner. Marie personally designed the interior not to flaunt wealth, but to preserve memories. Each room holds fragments of her family, her past, and her passion. This space is also where she finds peace. Surrounded by desert mountains and golden sunsets, Marie lives at a slower pace now. She takes long, brisk walks, rides bikes with her grandchildren, and often laughs about how she tries to outpace them. "Being a grandma is the best role I've ever had," she once said. Her commitment to health is not about vanity. It's about energy, about being present, about still dancing when life plays its tune. And yes, rumors have swirled for years about cosmetic surgery. Marie, ever candid, has brushed them off with grace. "I just want to feel my best, but the lines on my face, they're the roads I've traveled," she once said in an interview. Her face may have changed, but her spirit remains unmistakably Marie. Resilient, warm, and radiant. But perhaps the most surprising chapter of Marie's later life is her love story. One that seemed lost to time, only to be rewritten with more depth than before. In 2011, she remarried Steve Craig, her first husband from 1982. They had divorced in 1985. After only 3 years of marriage, life had taken them down different roads. Marie with her career, Steve with his own journey. But somehow, after decades and two very different lives, they found their way back to each other. When they chose to remarry, it wasn't on a whim. It was deeply symbolic. They picked May 4th for their wedding. Coincidentally, the birthday of both Marie's beloved mother, Olive, and her late son, Michael. It was my way of including them, she revealed, of making them part of our happiness. This second marriage wasn't about grand gestures or public displays. It was about quiet companionship, shared history, and mutual respect. "We don't need the world to validate us anymore," Marie once said. "We just want peace and love, and we found it." Their union now is built on empathy and endurance, strengthened not in spite of their past, but because of it. Together they travel the world, create memories, and live every day with appreciation that only time and heartbreak can teach. And just when the public thought they'd heard it all, Marie made headlines again. Not for a new album, not for a comeback tour, but for a personal financial decision that shocked many. She announced that she would not be leaving her estimated 20 million fortune to her children. "I'm not passing on my wealth," she said firmly. "My kids need to learn to work. If you hand them everything, they get lazy." It was a controversial stance. Critics called her cold, but Marie stood her ground. "I love my children enough to not make them weak," she said. "I've seen too many rich kids lose their way because they never had to struggle. I want mine to know the joy of earning something." It was a stance rooted not in detachment, but in the very essence of Marie's beliefs, faith, discipline, and self-reliance. Having grown up in a family where everyone worked hard from childhood, she knows the value of purpose and drive. Her children are not left unsupported. She remains an active, loving presence in their lives, but she has chosen to give them something more valuable than money: the ability to stand on their own. And so, what remains of Marie Osmond today? What has this woman become after decades of fame, family, heartbreak, and healing? She is a symbol not of perfection, but of perseverance. She still walks onto stages not for fame, but because music is the language of her soul. She still gives interviews, not for attention, but because her story might help someone else feel less alone. And in the silence of her Utah home, she still lights a candle for Michael, still sings his favorite songs, still folds his memory into every note she performs. "I pray when I can't stand," she once told a friend. "I cry when I must, but most days I just choose to love a little more." Marie Osmond no longer needs to prove anything, not to critics, not to fans, not even to herself. She has suffered more than most. And yet she has chosen to rise again and again. Her life is not a fairy tale, but a testament that even in the face of unimaginable loss, love endures. That even when everything crumbles, you can still build something beautiful. That the greatest legacy is not a fortune, but the example you leave behind. And maybe that is Marie's true gift. Not her voice, not her fame, but the way she lives. Quietly powerful, deeply human, and unforgettably real. And now we'd love to hear from you. Has Marie Osmond's journey touched your heart the way it has touched ours? Perhaps you too have faced loss, found love again, or discovered peace later in life. Share your thoughts, memories, or even your prayers in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your story could comfort someone else who needs to hear it. If this tribute moved you, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with others, and subscribing. Together, we keep the memories alive.